Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for that kickoff. Again, Louise and I are going to be talking about container gardening, which is a pretty wide topic. So we'll talk about various sizes and types of gardenings. We're going to focus a little bit more heavily on edibles because there's a lot of interest in that. And B, if you can do edibles, you can do some of the ornamentals that we'll also talk about. So that is the gist. Before we dig in too deeply, I'm going to hand it over to Louise pretty quickly. Did want to give you a feel for who we are and why we're here. So basically, Master Gardeners are, we're trained through the University of California. We are volunteers, and we are trained to help people understand how to better garden with science-based information. So we're working closely with the people at UC Davis and other academic institutions to really share information that's well vetted and tested in a lot of our gardens and the gardens of the academics. The way we help people is we do things like this. We do education webinars. I have to admit, are fairly new to us. Often we do in-library talks, in garden talks, demos, that sort of thing. The other way that's really helpful, especially this time of year, is we have information on a website. The website is here. We'll also be getting everyone a handout with details on how to get to our website. All information about how to garden and specific tips and trips that work here in our county. If you do any Googling on how to garden and you get advice from Pennsylvania, it's really not going to pair that well to how we garden here. So using Santa Clara County specific information can be very helpful. The other thing that's super helpful is that we have a help desk built in right in the name, where anyone in the county, if you have any gardening related question, you can either call, or these days using an online email submission form to submit a gardening question. You get that to us. Our volunteers review those every day, and we get back to you with an answer to your question. So you can ask anything from what's this bug on my tomato to, hey, I'm thinking of planting some flowers that tolerate shade. What's a good idea for that? We can help with those types of questions. So that, again, you go to our website, ask a gardening question, and that's how we help there. We have many demo gardens throughout the county. I believe most are currently closed to the public just because of COVID-19, but we hope that will change as things ease up. So, as that changes, our website will have more updates as to when you go and actually see our demo gardens. So that's us. So we're going to start off talking about container gardening and the where you would put containers and the types of containers you would use. And then we're going to move into what you put in those containers. So how you do with soil and fertilizer and different plants that you can plant and what works well. So to start off, I'm going to hand it over to Louise.
Okay, I'm Louise, and I'm going to go through some of the first part of the program here and then hand it back to Lisa. First of all, we want to talk a little bit about why would you grow in a container, and one really good reason, which a lot of people can relate to, is just that you don't have the space. You may have just a little patio, you may have a big garden, but it's all in the shade, something like that. You don't have enough sunlight. So lack of space is a really common reason why people grow in containers. Accessibility is an important one. Sometimes people can't get down to the ground. The ground is way down, you know, at the foot level, and it's nice to be able to have something that's not so far down. So containers are easier to access. Some plants, especially tomatoes, are notorious for being subject to diseases from the soil. And when you garden in containers, you can use fresh soil that doesn't have any diseases in it and have much better luck. If soil diseases is something in your yard, gardening in containers can really help. There aren't too many gardens in the Santa Clara area that are really swampy, but if you did have a really swampy yard, and some people around the world do certainly, gardening in containers is a way to elevate off of the wet soil and solve some drainage problems. And like in my backyard, I have a big tree. The tree roots get in the way. It's really helpful to be able to have containers where the trees can't get their roots in. And then, of course, it's just fun to garden in containers. It's just another way to garden. And what the heck, you know, we all love to garden. So let's give it a try in containers. You want to think about what are your goals. as you are planning your containers, if you want to grow vegetables, that's going to be one set of criteria. If you want to grow flowers and just go for beauty, that might be another way of thinking about your containers. So just for example, like with vegetables, you might not care that much what the container itself looks like. But if your goal is beauty, then yeah, you're going to want to pick a pretty container. This picture down in the lower right shows kind of a privacy screen that's created with containers. Those are really tall containers. So you can use containers as a way of kind of adjusting your garden. You can use them to hide ugly bits or bring out a foreground element in your yard that you want to emphasize. And then you can actually create little sub gardens in your garden. What we've got called here a calm oasis. And this next picture shows a corner of a garden that was particularly set up just really with containers. The only thing here that's not in a container is the little flagstone area. But all the other things, the pots against the fence and against the back wall, those are all in containers. And this person has used containers to create a little tiny garden just within their own backyard or their small patio garden. I don't even know what the other side of this yard looks like. But containers can just create a sweet little garden all by themselves without having to put anything in the actual ground. This one also has those cute twinkly lights for the nighttime, which I think is really nice. Let's see. Oh, and of course, there's this other situation, which I saw this house in Portland last summer. This is a floating home in a floating neighborhood. And of course, the people who live here can't garden in the ground. They only can garden in containers. And there were some really interesting container combinations in this floating neighborhood. So all kinds of situations that you might want to use containers. So the first thing that you want to do when you're gardening in containers is, after you've decided kind of what kinds of things you want to grow, is look for your sun. Sun with plants is like the #1 thing. And if you're going to grow vegetables or most flowers too, you need 5 or 6 hours of sunlight minimum. With less than that, you can grow some kinds of shade things or maybe some greens. Definitely you could grow shade type plants, but for vegetables you want 5 to 6 hours. 8, 10 hours would be even better of full sunshine. Another thing to consider when you're siting your plants is, can you access the pots? Are they easy for you to get to? If your pots are way down the hillside from where you are, it's going to be harder for you to get down there to work on them. And then access is also enhanced if the pots are actually within view. So if you're looking right out your kitchen window and you see your container garden, you're going to spend a lot more time out there, and you can see if the containers need your attention. So try to site your container garden within view if you can. It makes it a little bit easier to take care of it. Let's see. So so this is one that I think is really important, is to keep in mind sunshine. This is a containerized cat. This cat is telling you this is the right place to grow plants. You couldn't grow a cat, really. The cat just has to come on in. But a cat in a pot is definitely a sign that this is a good place to grow plants. So you might want to keep your own cat out of your garden. Another thing there are a few other things that you want to consider when you're setting up a container garden. One of them is, you might be tempted to put your containers up against a wall. Be sure that you notice whether that's a hot reflective wall. If it's a wall that's pushing a lot of heat from the sun back onto the plants, that might be an ideal place to grow melons, for example, cantaloupes or watermelons or something like that, a plant that really needs a lot of heat. But it wouldn't probably be the best location to grow spinach, for example. So do pay attention to hot walls. Also, as you set up your container garden, think about water sources, because if a container garden will generally need more attention from you, especially when it comes to water. And you don't want to be lugging water all over the place if it's really inconvenient. So try to either set up a water source near your garden, or put your containers near where you have a water source. So if there's a spigot, you might want to, put your containers near that, if that's also a sunny spot. And Lisa's going to talk a little bit more about watering your containers later on in the presentation. Another thing to think about, especially if you are gardening on, like say, the lower floor of an apartment complex where you have a patio and then there's an upper balcony above you, is there going to be room for an 8-foot tomato plant? Because some tomatoes, okra is another plant that gets really tall. So you need to consider the mature size of the plant before you decide what you're going to grow, and really think, do I actually have the room for the mature size of the plants that I want to grow? You might choose a variety that will stay smaller, or you might just choose not to grow that kind of tomato or that kind of plant. You might say, well, I can't grow okra, I'll choose something else. I can grow eggplants instead because they're kind of short. And then another thing definitely to keep in mind with containers is that those container pots, especially the big ones, when they're wet, they're really heavy. And if you are going to have to move those containers, you might want to have a hand truck around. I have found a hand truck in my own yard to be super helpful. To haul pots around, and also to, well, obviously it's for hauling pots, but seasonally you might want to bring, the beautiful lemon tree out right when it's fruiting in the winter time, but take it out of the way and put something else in that spot that looks prettier during a different time of year. And so a hand truck can be super handy for moving your containers around, and you don't want to hurt your back. Even a medium-sized container can be kind of hard on your back. So those are some special things to consider. Some of the things that are different about container gardening from gardening in the ground, and I noticed that a bunch of the poll participants said that they have gardens both in the ground and in containers, is you're going to water more often in containers than you are in the ground, because containers dry out faster. Those plants in the container, they are getting their roots right up to the edge. That container is their only source of water, and they will suck that water up fast. So you're really going to be watering more than you would a garden in the ground. You might need to fertilize more often. Lisa's going to talk in more depth about fertilizer. But certainly gardens in the soil often don't need all that much fertilizer, because our soils in Santa Clara County are actually very fertile. But in a container, you're definitely going to be needing to add fertilizer. And you may need to renew the soil periodically. In the ground, we add compost on top of the soil a couple times a year if we can, to help us renew the soil. But in a container, you may need to dump the whole thing out and start over with brand new soil. So certainly that's different from when you're gardening in the ground. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit about what some of the types of containers are that you might choose. So first, let me talk a little bit about terracotta, concrete, stone, and ceramic containers. This little Mexican style container is one that I just loved, and the colors I think are gorgeous. It's really a happy thing. Went really well with the nasturtiums and the decorative kale that I was growing there. And this other one on the right is a terracotta bowl that I really like to grow baby lettuces in, sort of as a cut and come again garden. But the problem with terracotta is that it's kind of porous, and so it tends to dry out even more quick than say the glazed pot on the left side. So the porosity of terracotta is something to keep in mind. Also, terracotta can be kind of fragile, and I don't want to go to that next picture yet, but it does tend to break. There's a lot of variety in terracotta in sizes, shapes, designs, and it's relatively inexpensive compared to like the big ceramic containers that are glazed. A glazed ceramic container is much less porous, well, is not porous, and so it'll hold water a lot better than an unglazed terracotta pot will. And they are more decorative. So it's kind of up to you. But the next slide will shows how a terracotta pot can actually be broken. This one was broken by a combination of the roots expanding and, even more important, the cold. It was a frosty night, and because there was, you know, the roots and the moisture in the pot kind of got frozen, it broke the pot. So do be aware that terracotta pots can be kind of fragile. The next kind of thing I'd like to talk about, what you could grow in, is wood or wicker or wine barrels. Wood is a really good thing to grow in. It does allow a lot of air into the roots, which can be good, but because it's a little porous like terracotta, it will also dry out faster. So just be aware that when you're growing in a wood box or a wood bed, it's gonna lose water quicker. It is relatively inexpensive compared to like those glazed ceramic pots. If you're going to grow in wood, and especially if you want to have something that you're going to grow in for a while, do consider using either redwood or cedar or teak, because those are woods that will last a lot longer. In the upper left is a picture of a garden in that's a forklift pallet, which is kind of a really cool idea. That person tipped it up on its end and stuffed soil down inside of it and grew some plants. But forklift pallets are made out of really cheap wood. So a situation like that isn't going to last a long time. So do choose redwood, cedar, or teak if you want a long-lasting wooden container. And then wine barrels make fabulous, fabulous containers to grow plants in. You can get a half wine barrel for, I've bought them for $35. They are designed to be watertight when they're kept moist, so they're really excellent for growing plants in. But with wine barrels, and also I didn't mention, with some of the ceramic containers, you absolutely have to put in drain holes. So with a wine barrel, I would put in at least 10, drill at least 10 holes in the bottom, big holes, like, you know, maybe inch-size holes in the bottom of a wine barrel, to get lots and lots of drainage. Every pot that you grow in, no matter what, has to have drain holes. That's probably, I'd say that's like the number one thing after sun. Drain holes is like number one. And then plastic is a super common material for containers for plants. The advantage of plastic is that it's relatively cheap, really relatively cheap. And you can get even large, you know, this size of plastic containers at some place like Home Depot for not too much money. Plastic is not porous, which means that the soil is not going to dry out nearly so fast. So it can be a water-saving kind of material to grow in. You can choose all kinds of plastic containers. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes and colors. The plastic does have a tendency to fade, which can look kind of ratty after a little while. But you know, it's up to you. And certainly for vegetables, there are lots and lots of good plastic containers. One thing to watch out for with the black plastic containers, especially if they're in a really sunny spot, is that the sun on the black plastic will heat up the roots of the plant. And plants, I don't know any plant that likes to have hot roots. They might like to have heat up around their leaves, but they don't really like to have hot roots. So you want to watch out for that. On a really hot day, you might want to shade the plastic pot, or you can even take the black plastic pot and put it inside a bigger pot that will then shade the black plastic so it doesn't get so hot. I wanted to show on the next slide, down here at the bottom in the corner of that picture, that's just some arugula growing in a plastic shoebox. So you really can grow useful amounts of vegetables in just, you know, some cheap little container that you have around the house. I did punch holes in the bottom of it though. So again, drainage, drainage, drainage. You have to have, you definitely have to have drainage holes.
Right. Hey, Louise, there is a question from
Sure.
Alice. She's saying, can you wrap foil around the black plastic pots? So would that be useful?
Yeah, I've never done that before, but it sounds like a fabulous idea.
It checks out to reflect the heat. Yeah.
Yeah, it would both reflect the heat and shade the black plastic. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Good call there. Thanks, Alice. Is it Alice?
Yes.
Alice. So another kind of container that you might consider is polystyrene or resin. I actually really like these containers. They're more on the expensive side, but they're very lightweight, but they can be designed to imitate something that looks a little more classy in your backyard. And the sides of some of these polystyrene containers are actually kind of thick. And the thickness and the foam that some of them are made of automatically makes it an insulator so that it's going to keep the roots cooler. So if you can find those kinds of containers and you like them, that's something you might want to try. The middle picture in the bottom here shows somebody growing some chard, I believe that is, and some other greens in literally a polystyrene shipping container. You could also try those super cheap coolers that they sell at the bait shops. You know, those would make actually pretty good containers to grow in. They're also light colored, so they're going to reflect the light. They wouldn't get hot on the outside. So the white plastic doesn't look so great, but might be a really good place for a plant to live in the hot summer. These kinds of containers are durable and they last a long time also. And then there's this new kind of container that we've been seeing more and more lately, which is fabric. And these two pictures are my daughter's COVID-19 victory garden, or I guess whatever we want to call them. She got in on the fad and bought some seeds and planted some plants. And I've never grown in fabric, but she's giving it a try. And so far, it looks like it's a winner. One of the advantages of the fabric is that when you're not using those containers, you can just smush them flat and store them in the garage, so they don't take up a lot of space. Her plants seem to be doing really well. And some of those containers are pretty big. The biggest ones are 24 inches in diameter. So that's a nice big container. You can put a lot of soil in there. Each one of the biggest of those containers is I think it'll hold about 2.5 bags, maybe 3 bags of potting soil from, I should know the cubic footage, but of the potting soil bags that I would buy. Another advantage of the fabric bags is that they do what's called air pruning the roots. So as the roots of the plant grow out towards the edge of the container, in a plastic container, they will see the same amount of moisture at the edge as they would see in the middle. But in a fabric container, it's going to be dry out there. And that dryness causes the roots to dry out a little bit and just die at the very ends. And so the plant branches its roots more on the interior of the pot. So the air pruning that happens with these fabric containers is kind of cool. And I think it's something to consider, as it'll prevent the plants from getting pot bound and that kind of thing. One disadvantage, oh sorry, I was just going to say one disadvantage of these containers, the fabric ones, is that even though they have handles on them, moving them is going to disturb the roots and the soil, because they're not stiff, they're not rigid. So they look movable, but I don't think they're actually all that movable. So, was there a question?
Good. Yeah, I'll give you a two-part question. One was, do you know what type of fabric this is? It looks like there may be purpose for growing bought. So that's one question. And then how about cocoa fiber baskets? Any parallels there that you can draw?
Yeah, I think these are canvas. I believe they're cotton, but they might be a combination of cotton and polyester or nylon. I'd have to look it up because I don't actually know. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of options online. I have seen the Coir grow bags. Those so for instance, if a bag has a nylon component, it'll last a lot longer than if it's 100% cotton or 100% core. Those, because they're non-synthetic, wouldn't last for very many years, I don't think. And certainly if they were flat on the ground, they might rot out at the bottom. So you might want to look for containers that have at least some synthetic component if you want to use them year after year. What was the other question? Or maybe I got that. Oh, sorry, you're muted. Okay, we'll go on. I can answer more questions about the cloth bags if they come up later. And then you want to consider, after you've kind of decided the look you want and the material you want, you just want to start considering the size. And Lisa will talk about specifics when she gets to specific veggies, but do keep in mind that some vegetable plants can get really, really big, and tomatoes are notorious for that. I mentioned okra. Broccoli is also a really big plant. There are a lot of veggies that get huge, and so you want to, if I had to say choose one, err on the bigger side. Better bigger than too small, because a bigger container is going to make for a happier plant. But you can grow lots of plants in shallow containers too. You could grow lettuce in a shallow container. You could grow onions in a shallower container. Sometimes even little root vegetables like little radishes or mini turnips you could grow in a small container, because those ones just don't have a really deep root system. So again, think of what you're going to grow first as you choose your containers. And then one of the other things I want to point out is the kind of accessories. You can put your pot on wheels if you want to, and roll it around, which will kind of negate the need for the hand truck I was mentioning earlier, although a hand truck is still really helpful. Another thing is you can buy little ceramic feet, or even plastic or wooden feet to put under the pot, or a fancy one like this one with the curlicues in the picture. The barrel, this is a wine barrel on the left here. That barrel is on just some pavers, but again, it's elevated off the ground. It's pretty important. It's not essential, but it does really help your containers to stay healthy if you lift them up off the ground a little bit. And so you might want to try one of these options. And again, if you go online and look at pot risers or pot feet, you'll see a jillion different ways that you can get your pots up off the ground. But again, you can use rocks, you can use bricks or pavers, that kind of thing will work too. Even some old boards would do the trick. One thing I want to mention is about saucers under plants. Saucers are great to protect surfaces. So for example, if you have a plant on a deck, you might want to have a saucer. But the problem with saucers is that they collect water, and plants do not like to have soggy feet. They don't want their roots to be in water all the time. So if there's water collecting in a saucer, you absolutely have to dump that out. Don't let it stand. The roots may rot. The only plant I've ever grown where I really wanted a wet saucer was watercress. If you want to grow watercress, it's great, and you definitely do want to have a saucer under that so you can have a really wet environment for that. But otherwise, either stay away from saucers or make sure that you dump them out. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we move on to Lisa's section, let me take a quick break here. We often get questions about self-watering containers, and there is a brand that a lot of people are familiar with where you can buy the container and it comes with soil and all kinds of fertilizer, and a lot of people will grow tomatoes in those. But you can also build your own, and if you go online, again, there are a bazillion YouTube videos and instructions about how to build your own self-watering containers. But the main thing about a self-watering container is just that it provides a reservoir at the bottom. and a small amount of soil that goes down into the water and then separates the rest of the soil from the water so that the plant can just be wicking up the water as it needs it. And you just pour water into the pipe and the water goes down into the reservoir, and then you don't have to worry about giving the plant the right amount of water. The plant will suck up the amount of water that it needs. So I have found self-watering containers to be handy and really easy to take care of because you don't have to futz with the water amount as much. It's also hard to overwater with one of these self-watering containers. So I've talked about why you might garden in containers and what kind of containers you might want to garden in. And I'm going to stop talking now and give you a different person to listen to and let Lisa take it from here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lisa. Not so fast. I have a couple questions.
Oh,
the question went, and I'm sorry about the mute button. It's mousing away, not something you want to hear about. There was a question about cocoa fiber baskets. So you talked about the cloth baskets.
Let's
cocoa
go.
fiber baskets generally work?
I've never grown in a cocoa fiber basket. I think that they should be fine. The one thing you're going to have to be very careful with something like that is that it's really porous. Because you could blow through the cocoa fiber because it's just a mat, and so the porosity of that is going to allow a lot of air to get in and a lot of moisture to get out. So if you are growing in a cocoa fiber pot, hanging pot, or a pot on the ground, you got to check it really often to make sure that it doesn't dry out. And in our hot summers, a cocoa fiber basket will dry out for sure. So do check it.
Okay. Good. And then there's so Colleen asked about germinating seeds, which is a whole 2-hour topic in itself, if not more. But yeah, the tips for germinating seeds. Any off the top of your head you want to share, Louise?
Are we talking, I don't know if we're talking vegetable seeds. I'll assume we're talking vegetable seeds. Just general tips for vegetable seeds. In the winter time, if you're germinating, you want to germinate indoors and you want to give them a heat mat. And that's something to go learn about. If you're germinating your seeds outdoors in a container, in our summertime, you have nice warm soil, so that's not usually a problem. But you want to make sure that they do not dry out, because anytime a seed dries out while it's trying to germinate, it's very likely to die. So keeping them moist while the seed is trying to germinate is probably number one. The other thing would be, one other tip about germinating seeds is I highly, highly recommend that you use potting soil. The kind of potting soil Lisa's going to talk about. You don't need to buy seed starting mix, but also don't try to germinate in containers in compost, because compost has a lot of pathogens in it that particularly could rot seeds. I love compost, but not for germinating seeds. So use a commercial potting mix to germinate your seeds in containers.
Yep, I would, it's a lot to cover. I think, yeah, temperature and of one, I have a lot of birds. So here, I think my seeds aren't growing. And when I look closely, I was like, no, birds decided
ate them.
To treat. So that's another.
Yeah, cover them. A row cover is a good idea.
Yeah.
For
so yeah, but again, a huge long topic. There's heat maps. There's also two things. Let's see. A question: can you drill holes in the saucer so to keep the roots from rotting?
Well, you could. That kind of defeats the purpose of the saucer, which is to prevent the water from going through. So the drainage, the pot has a hole in the bottom of it, always, 100% of the time. You have to have a hole in the bottom of the pot where the soil is. But I don't really see a reason to drill a hole in the saucer. I just wouldn't even use a saucer. But if you want to drill a hole in the saucer for your own reason, sure.
Okay. Great. Yeah, because I would think then it might not protect what it's sitting on. So good. We have a couple questions about growing peppers, which the cheat answer is yes, you're able to grow bell peppers. I'll talk about that. And we'll talk about soil replenishment too. So so let me get myself where I am sharing the screen. Great. So I'm going to take off go back, good overview. So Louise talked about where to put your container, what kind of container to use. I want to talk about what you're going to put in your container. So between soil, water, fertilizer, and then what plants you can actually grow in containers. I see there's been quite a few questions of, can I grow this? Can I grow that? We'll do our best to address those as we go along. And in the end, we can try to help troubleshoot or answer questions of individual plants as time permits. So I'm going to start by talking about the soil that we use. So when you plant in the ground, as Louise mentioned, our soils here are great. You dig up the soil. If you're planting vegetables, you might add a source of organic matter or compost, and then you're generally good to go with a hit of nitrogen or something. In containers, everything your plant needs to grow needs to be in that container. So because of that, and because the drainage needs are different, you do need to really aim for a potting mix. So it's basically some type of gardens or some type of soil that's specific to growing in containers. So for vegetables and most like, you know, flowers and other annuals, you're looking for something that's just called potting soil or potting mix. Now, when you go to the garden centers, you'll get confused very easily, or at least I personally have. There's things called planting mix. There's things called garden soil. There's things called topsoil. These are not what you need. You need something that's specifically for potting, for using for potted plants. And the other thing that is generally a no-no in containers is using your native soil. Those of you that have been brainwashed by us master gardeners that our clay soils are great for gardening, they are great for gardening when they're in the ground. When you talk about soils in containers, you're going to need something that has different characteristics. So to break down what those characteristics are, a potting mix is going to kind of look like what's here on the top left. And I'm sorry, the top right. It's generally composed of two things. It's mostly an organic component of some sort. So here on our coast, we often have composted forest products, peat moss and coir, like a byproduct of coconut, are classic good materials that are going to not only hold water, but also release it to the plants. It's going to hold water and also allow some amount of air for those roots to grow in what they need. Almost always in a potting soil, they're going to include a mineral component, one or more. Perlite, you see in almost all of them. Perlite is those little white chunks. They actually don't absorb water. They're there to keep some air in the soil, such that, again, the plants in the container have good enough drainage that the roots are able to breathe. Pumice is another mineral-like component. It actually absorbs a little water, though, so it'll do a slow release of water into your garden soil. So that's one other mineral thing. Verbicula is the opposite. It's actually a substance that absorbs and keeps water within, so it helps to add moisture to the soil. So some potting mixes will use some of that to help with the moisture retention if they don't have enough of an organic component that holds that much moisture. So yeah, so there's definitely a science to what's in those potting mixes, and this is the mix of what is in there. And again, the main difference of this soil is that it's helping the plants, the roots and the water is going to drain. It's got better drainage and going to give those plants in the pots the ability to, for their roots to breathe, basically, because roots are like humans. They actually do need to breathe. Let's see, so that's the soil you start with. So they need a soil, which is the medium from which they'll grow. In addition, we need to give plants nutrients to grow. Again, within our clay soils, often we can get by with no or very little nutrients. Because you're in a container, we need to give the plant all of what it needs to grow. So the main nutrients that plants need are the NPK, so nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the three macronutrients that all plants need to grow. They're also going to need calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, different elements that are generally, if you're buying an all-purpose fertilizer, they're generally going to be well balanced with the nutrients that are needed for the plant that you're growing. So that's something to look for as you go to feed plants. How you know what's in a fertilizer, we have regulations that tell you exactly how to share what's in your fertilizer. So often when you buy fertilizer in a garden center or online, wherever you're getting it these days, often you'll see 3 numbers, and those 3 numbers are always in the same order. It's the content nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, or phosphate and potassium. in that order. To be honest, for most, especially in garden and also container garden, this first number, the nitrogen, is really important for growth. And that's what actually, the one thing we need to supplement our clay soils with when you plant in the ground. In containers, you're going to want one that's more well balanced. And in the guaranteed analysis part here, they'll also list the additional nutrients that are included in this particular plant food. So again, you're looking for one that's balanced. Yes.
There's a question about organic fertilizer, or can you talk a little bit about organic fertilizers and how you would tell?
I sure can. So organic fertilizers are basically a fertilizer that's based on, that's not a chemical process. It's based on basically life-based things. And I say organic versus inorganic, it's different than if you ask a chemist the difference, it's a different thing than organic versus inorganic as far as garden markets go. But generally, organic fertilizers are going to be plant or animal based and a slow released form. So for example, an organic NPK fertilizer and a synthetic NPK fertilizer, the synthetic ones are generally more dense. So a 10-5-5, that's going to likely be on a synthetic fertilizer. And again, in this guaranteed analysis, I don't think they technically match. We've got things like urea, nitrogen. Let's see, I'm looking at this one. The derived from, it's being derived from phosphate and sodium borates and different things that are actually technically inorganic. Organic fertilizers are going to tend to more bat guano, worm castings. Those are going to be organic forms of fertilizer. And as far as fertilizing your plants, both are going to do the job. I would give you a little different answer in ground. In containers, the most important thing is to use the right concentration based on what the fertilizer is. And in this case, for container gardens, often you can go by the label. It'll describe what ratio to use. So for example, a teaspoon in a gallon of water, or X amount per size of plant, X number of times a month or week or whatnot. So you'll really want to key off of that based on the fertilizer that you're given. So and again, and there's different people have different feelings. There's different science about whether organic or inorganic fertilizers are better. As far as the success of your container garden, mostly you want to just use the right amount of fertilizer at the right time. Does that help to answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And if someone was asking about fertilizer for strawberries, how do you know if the phosphate is higher or the potassium is higher or the nitrogen is higher? Can you explain that again?
Oh, okay. Let's see. For strawberries specifically, like what fertilizer
they said the question is there a fertilizer high in P and low in high in P and K and low in N? What would that look like?
Yes. So yeah, if you needed a fertilizer without nitrogen, which there are cases where you might want, potassium, for example, instead, this first number would be either 0 or a very low number compared to the second and third number. So for example, off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank, but if it was a fertilizer that was exclusively for potassium, it might be 0.005 or 1 to 15. So it's kind of relative scale. So yeah, so if you've done the math and you realize that you need strawberry fertilizer with a certain balance, just look for a fertilizer that again has a high P and K. Those second two numbers are high and the nitrogen is relatively low, and that'll get you that balance.
Great.
So got it. So that's the basics of how the fertilizer, and often we say fertilizer, it could be plant food, could be plant supplement, that sort of thing. But it's just getting, again, the minerals into the soil that those plants need to grow. And again, you will be doing that when you're doing container gardening. Let's see. So nitrogen, again, is one of the most important things for the annual flowers and vegetables as they grow. They're going to use, quite a bit of nitrogen to kick out the fruits of their labor. So be it a beautiful flower or be it a nice red tomato. So that's going to be something that's important and that you'll be supplementing on a pretty regular basis throughout the growing season. For container gardens specifically, we do find that the liquid versions tend to be best absorbed by the roots. So often you buy plant food and you'll mix it into garden soil, or there'll be little time capsule, like capsulated food that you again mix into the soil and it releases over time. We find again in containers that the liquid state is it's just a little easier for the plants to absorb given the medium they're in. So that's the type we recommend again for containers. Often they work where you will take either a granular or even a liquid and you'll blend it, you'll mix it up in a watering can, or there's little hose end sprayers that you can put a solution in and water that way. I find for containers it's almost easiest. And you know, people talk about watering cans. I actually have a 1 gallon milk jug. I know it's exactly a gallon, so I know exactly how much of the stuff to add to it, shake it up, and then carefully distribute that on the plants. So there's many ways to do that. If you give, you know, it's not like, you know, too much food, is that going to make the plant healthier? No, there's only so much the plant wants to absorb. And again, usually the labels are pretty good at indicating how much and how frequently to feed a plant. So too much will impact in negative ways, too little are going to impact negative ways. So you really want to keep it balanced and keep on a schedule for getting the food to the plants at the right time. Again, read the label for the roots and how often you feed them. It will vary based on the product you're using. Also keep in mind, before I talked about the importance of buying a potting mix or potting soil, note that some of them actually include NPK fertilizer in the potting soil itself. So there's some of the big brands just have, you know, it'll say grows for 6 months, or it'll say, you know, last most of the season, or they use terms like that where it's like no fertilizer needed. So some of the potting mixes will include that fertilizer. It can be very handy, especially at planting time, and that it's something you don't have to think about for a while. But do remember, again, look at the label and you'll want to go with the recommendations of, okay, after it can be anywhere from 1 to 3 months, then you'll want to start fertilizing with an outside fertilizer. So just keep in mind, if you do get a potting soil that is I shouldn't say injected, often it's naturally in there. If it's, you know, got the nitrogen component in the soil, just know that you might be delaying your initial fertilizer schedules. And that exists both in some of the potting soils that have the inorganic, the synthetic nitrogen, potassium additions. And also some of the organic soils do have a certain NPK in them when you plant. So just check the label, both when deciding to buy and then once you've bought and get them in the ground, just do the math to see when you want to start adding the supplemental food. Let's see.
Can you take one more question about fertilizer?
Sure, because we're about to move on to water. Go for it.
Someone's asking about worm composting. Can you just use worm compost, or do you need to also buy fertilizer? I don't actually know that much about worm compost myself.
Okay, well, I know worm compost is a fantastic source of nitrogen and organic matter for soils, so that is a good thing. The thing which is great, again, great for garden soils, great as an additive. A lot of home-based things that you're going to use, the problem is you don't have a nutrient analysis. So you're really not sure how much nitrogen is in there. You know, how much nutrition is it going to provide to your plants. So while it is probably an excellent thing to add to soils, for container gardens, it's going to be a safer, but you're going to have more control if you use something where you know what the chemical breakdown of the fertilizer is. That said, you have the worm castings. They are good for a soil. They're great. If I had the luxury of both containers and in garden plants, I would probably use the worm castings in garden plants, because again, that organic matter is really helping our clay soils be a really productive soil. And then just rely on something with an NPK number for my container plants, especially if it's something edible where you really rely on the heavy feeding, or the heavy, not the heavy, the nutrients in the plant food.
Great.
That makes sense? Okay. Good. I'm going to go on to making sure we stay on time somewhat. So watering. So like Louise said, yes, plants need water to grow. They need a nice sunny spot, especially vegetables, and water. For containers, there's a lot of ways you can water. Good old watering can, a pitcher, my 1 gallon milk jug. Always clean it out though first, of course. Hoses to hand water with a hose, all completely reasonable options. Drip systems are also a great way to go with containers. A drip system tied together with a timer such that the plants are watered even if you sleep in or forget is something that's really going to help you be successful. You know, you sleep in one day, you forget to water when it's watering day, suddenly your vegetable dries out. They are not happy, especially in containers. They don't have the buffer zone of being in the ground with the clay soil to protect it a little bit. So, so a drip system on a timer can really help to make sure that you have success. For edibles specifically, there are some exceptions once we get into succulents and some other types of plants. But you want the soil to be moist, can't be dry, can't be soggy. So again, roots breathe just like humans. So they want nice moist soil, but they don't want to be completely soggy. And Louise talked about some strategies to keep the drainage good in your pots. How you're going to tell whether the soil is moist or not. There's a look component. You look at the plants. Sometimes you can see the plants not looking so healthy, and that is one thing. You can also look at the surface of the soil, a little bit around the mulch, which I will talk about, very important aspect. So you can look to see, okay, does the soil look most moist at the top? So that's one thing. I would also use touch, because it could be the top got a nice little patina of you know, wetness. Like for example, today we got just a spit of rain coming down. So I look at my plants, they look fine, they look nice and wet. If I go even an inch down, not so, because that rain wasn't sufficient. So really touching and digging a little bit into the soil, see if the water is getting down into the root zone, an inch or two down. So using your finger is good. You can also use a moisture meter to kind of dig in. You want to poke in a few places in the pot to make sure that the water is or the soil is moist throughout the root zone. The other thing you can do is weigh the pot. I mean, if you have a scale, you can actually weigh it, or you can do like I do, which is how heavy is it, or one-handed. Is it heavy? Is it light? If it's air light, it doesn't have water, it needs water if, again, it is an edible or a normal annual. So those are 3 different ways to measure and keep an eye on it. And again, when we water, the plant needs the water, but if you water the plant and it goes straight down and goes out those drain holes, the plant is not getting all the water. The plant needs it in the entire root zone. So as you do set up your irrigation, and then over time as you water, you do want to kind of verify. I do it every couple weeks, maybe once a month if things are looking good. Make sure the water is getting to the entire root zone. In potted plants, you can get a couple different dilemmas. You've got this dilemma here on the right, where this is an example where if you have, for example, if you've set up diligently a drip system with one emitter right at the base, and it evolves to a point where the water just goes straight down, the roots aren't getting it, that could be a problem. So you want to make sure that's not happening. You also want to make sure the inverse isn't happening, where if you've got this root zone here, and you water on top and the waters can go off just to the sides, for example, not get in the root zone, that's a similarly, you know, not ideal situation. So we really want to make sure the whole root zone is wet. And by watering on a regular basis, you'll get the plant to the point where the roots in the soil are in a nice, happy relationship where it will be accepting the water. But that is something just to check on a regular basis to make sure the water is going in the right place. Let's see, drip irrigation. So this is some of the elements. This is a little, some extra elements too. If you are to set up a drip system for a small container area, these are often the components that you can use. Basically, from a hose bib, you'd often put in your timer, the very first thing. And again, timers, they're what took me into not being able to eat vegetables to being able to eat vegetables. Because while I think I'm reliable and I think I love going out and watering my vegetables, I go on a business trip and suddenly the plants are dead. So, so having a timer really helps you be reliable about your watering. You'll be putting in a backflow preventer. There'll be a filter to make sure gunk doesn't get in your irrigation system. There's a thing that reduces the pressure to make sure all the little emitters at the end spit out water in the right way without busting off little end pieces. You can optionally put in a fertilizer feeder tube here, and from there it's going to go out into your drip system. So it looks like a lot of parts. Once you get it all set up and get it running out to your containers, it's actually a fairly straightforward. Everything is pretty much you screw in or pull, usually with the help of either some sun to make it easier to get the connections in and out. And yeah, and you can set up a system that provides drip irrigation, which is the right amount of irrigation at the right time in the right place, without wasting a whole lot of water. So it's a good option for a lot of people. This is an example of the last mile of that drip irrigation system. So often it goes to a 1/2-inch black tube, and then you poke a little hole, and then it goes into what we call spaghetti tubing. Very technical term. I'm sure there's a better term for that. But it's basically spaghetti tubing, and that's something you can reach out to any size shaped container. So this is an example where we've got a spaghetti tube with no emitters at all. At this point, there's a juncture that's hard to see. From here, we've got a system where it's got basically 3 in line and 1 emitter at the very end. So it's got 4 little spigots where it's going to be dripping water out. This is a fairly sizable pot. I believe this is an 18-inch pot. So this is ready for a eggplant actually to be put in once it gets warm enough. So this is a way of, again, being sure that the water gets to the entire root zone and not just one place in that pot. So by creating that little semicircle, you can use a little stake. Once the actual plant is in the ground, we'll probably adjust it to make sure it's in the right zone. That's going to help to make sure the drip irrigation gets to the whole base of the plant there. And by then, hopefully these lettuce will grow big enough so I can just have one less lettuce before they all bolt. Let's see, water, this relates to both waters and weeds and overall plant health. So in your gardens, often we are recommending a layer of mulch, be it bark, be it wood chips, be it straw, be it oak leaves, be it little even rocks, inorganic substances work fine. Something that basically lays on the top of the soil that does a couple things. The main thing for containers, it's going to keep that moisture in. So here you're giving it all this water. You want to keep that root zone moist by putting a layer of matter on top of the soil. It's going to help keep the soil moist. It's also going to help regulate the temperature in that container. It'll also keep weeds out. Weeds aren't as much of an issue in container garden. And when you start with fresh potting soil, you wouldn't think that you would get any seeds, but somehow every once in a while you just see a weed even though it's in fresh potting soil. So thank you, birds. Thank you, nature, that brings things around. So the mulch will help keep that at bay also. But it's really good for moisture retention and keeping, keeping that soil temperature and moisture right. And again, there's a variety of things you can do. Purchase mulches, you can use pine leaves, oak leaves, wood chips. I've used little river rocks. It's nice to have a little bit of aeration just to make sure that, again, that respiration can happen. So I would use big stones where there's not as much respiration involved. But yeah, something that lets the water and a little bit of air through, but keeps moisture and temperature in. Let's see, so that's on irrigation. If there's no other questions, I'm going to talk just a little bit about pests and what you'll need to do. Louise, is there?
Just one quick question about the quality of moisture meters. Are they good?
It depends on your soil. So they measure, so moisture meters, I had one in the other room. I was going to bring it in. The quick and dirty ones you'll buy at a garden center it's a little round meter with a long metal probe that goes into a soil, and it tells you how moist the soil is. And it's measuring actually conductivity, so it's measuring a proxy for how wet the soil is, basically. We've found, depending on the soil, sometimes they do and don't work. For example, here in our clay soils, often the meter can't quite get the connection it needs to give you an accurate reading. So we found in that case, they aren't all that great or useful. In potting soils, the evidence we have is that they tend to do okay, not necessarily that you're at a 10 on a scale 1 to 10 versus a 6 on a scale 1 to 10, but they do a good job at giving you an indication of, okay, this soil is nice and wet versus, oh, this soil is really on the dry side. So that's generally the experience we see with them. If you do have one, it's worth testing. Test when you know the conditions. So for example, if you know something's dry, put it in there and see if it registers it dry. Give it a good soaking, see if it registers it wet, and then wait a day, see if it, so it's best to, basically it's calibrating in an old-fashioned way to see if the meter is giving you the data you want, because while I say it's pretty easy to go out, take off your glove, dig your index finger in and, see if it feels wet or not. Sometimes it's just easier to poke a probe in because it's much thinner, less likely to disturb roots while you do that. So it can be really convenient. But yeah, you want to calibrate and make sure it's giving you the information that you need to know.
Great, thanks.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So pests, I hate to talk about pests because we all like to think we put in our gardens and they just grow beautifully, which often happens here in California. I'm going to talk about two things that probably the most common questions we get at our help desk and how to deal with them. And then I'll show you what to do to look up other problems you might have. So aphids are a question we get all the time. We see them, I've started to see them creep up in my gardens. They're definitely getting out and about. They're those little squishy things that will get on, they love charred leaves, they love the inside of a kale leaf. They love all sorts of plants, and they're just little squishy things that will eat at your plants. They can be green, they can be black, but they're there, and it's something we regularly have to deal with. So the most recommended control we have is, while they're icky and they're all over, they're actually really easy to hose off. So if you have a hose nearby, ideally you do, or a squirt bottle, just with straight water, just wash them off. Once they're off the plant, they're usually dead and they're not coming back. So a steady stream of water is going to help rinse them off. Sometimes you'll maybe lightly rub the leaf to make sure they're all getting off. A reason we do that, I'll jump to the last point, is that if you're washing with just water, you're going to, release them. The fact that aphids are there, they're a pain when you see a bunch of them on your vegetables. They're good in that almost so many beneficial insects love aphids. So if you've got aphids on your plant, it's going to bring in the lady beetles. It's going to bring in some of these beneficial insects that are going to not only eat your aphids, they're going to eat other things that would otherwise get your beneficials. So by not going to the insecticidal soaps and other things that might kill them, you're helping to encourage that natural predator to come into your garden. The other thing for aphids, often we'll see colonies where you get ants that actually are farmers. So they want to encourage the presence of aphids, because aphids will eat and leave some honeydew left over, and then the ants like to eat that honeydew. So often if you control for ants, that's helping create a better environment, or at least a less friendly environment for aphids. So if you do have a bad infestation and you do see ants, controlling for the ants can often help solve the problem. So those are some of the tips and tricks we have for aphids. The other thing we sometimes see, even when you're in a container garden and it's not out with the wildlife will sometimes find your tasty vegetables. So with what we call vertebrates, so this would be squirrels, this would be rabbits, this would be, any other deer even, if they're able to get to your containers and are starting to munch on them, you'll need to think about how to make sure that you get the vegetables and they don't. We find almost all the time the most effective barrier is a physical barrier. So for example, here we've got some semi-rigid screens. This is, I believe this is metal, and then it's covered with a bird netting or deer netting. I think it's a 1/4-inch mesh, it looks like, product. So it's basically something physically to make sure that the critter cannot eat the thing inside. I think these look quite nice. I have some that are much uglier. So depending on where it is in your property, you can spend as much time making it pretty or not so pretty as you want. A bonus of growing in containers, and the reason I moved to container gardening for some of my vegetables, gophers by definition can't get into this container here. As long as it's 2 feet off the ground, they can't get in. So that's one critter you won't have to worry about. But there are other critters that people that grow in containers sometimes have to worry about. So, please, yes.
What about rats? What's the best thing to keep what's the best kind of screen or thing to keep rats out?
Depends on how tenacious the rat is. I have known something like this to be good enough to keep rats and other chewing things out. I do know there are some that are, really small and get through small holes. I know there are some big ones that will, create havoc, wreak havoc on different things. So yeah, it really depends on the size and what type of damage is being done. Starting with something, I shouldn't say small. You start small, you get bigger. It depends on what infrastructure you have or whatnot. But yeah, just something physically to keep whatever critter it is at bay is what you're looking for. So yeah, I can't say whether this type setup is going to be robust enough for the average rat or not.
Are those metal?
These are, I believe these are, and the recommendation is something rigid just to make sure that they stay put, and then with a more mesh netting that'll take care of some of the smaller critters. So, so yeah, it's hard to see in this photo, but there's a little mesh container here. I've seen people take tomato cages or smaller tomato cages and use those with some type of, either cloth barrier. You can also use, this is what we call shade cloth. That can be affixed to a tomato cage or something rigid. And then again, it kind of keeps a framework literally to keep critters at bay. So that's the best we got there. So there's a lot of other things you might encounter in your garden, and I'm not going to talk all about them today, but I am going to point you to the IPM site. IPM is short for Integrated Pest Management. So this is, and this will be in your handout that we get to you afterwards. So this is a website where it'll basically tell you based on the crop you're growing, and we have it both for landscape and vegetables and melons type thing. You can click on what your crop you're growing, and then it'll describe, here are the different things that might be happening to your crop, given that you live here in California. So it helps winnow from who knows what problem it is to, okay, you're in California, it might be this. And then it'll tell you, okay, based on that critter or that problem, here's what you do. Here's the least toxic method. Here's more toxic methods. Here's methods that you would need a certified license to apply. So it gives you the whole range of how big a guns you want / need to use. Again, for container gardens, hopefully you're doing with keep an eye out, pick off the negatives, wash off some aphids, encourage the beneficials to come and take over. But this is the site to go if there is something. And again, you can always use our help desk to help answer specific questions. So that's pests. Now I'd like to move on and talk about some of the fun stuff of things you can grow and what you might want to do to grow them. I'm going to start out talking about the edibles, the vegetables, because I've heard there's a lot of interest in that. And then the other reason I'll start with those is those are going to be some of the more, there's things you need to do, like providing support, obviously the nutrition we talked about. And then I'll talk about some of the other things you can grow in containers. And I think compared to vegetables, you find most of them to be fairly easy and fairly straightforward. So we're starting in advance and going to some of the easier things to grow. So we've got peppers here. Peppers, and someone already asked, can you grow bell peppers in containers? And the answer is yes, they do quite well. You do need a big container. So at least 14 inches deep. We talk about depth of container. You'll notice if you go to buy containers, sometimes they'll give the metrics in gallons, sometimes they'll give the metrics in diameter. We tend to think about the root depth. So we'll go with that metric. So be sure to look and compare. So peppers are at least 14 inches deep. So it's going to need to be over a foot deep. Peppers come in various sizes. So for example, I grow a little fireball. Little fireballs they're like little fireballs. They're actually not very hot at all, despite the name. So they actually get by with on the smaller side of a pepper container. So for example, 14-inch is going to be enough for that type of pepper. Some of the larger peppers or the more vigorous growing varieties might need a larger pot. And this applies to most vegetables you're going to grow. So you will, as you choose which variety to grow, ask at your garden center or read the seed packet or the little plant label as far as whether it's suitable for containers or what you might need to know if you grow in containers. So that's with peppers. Peppers, like many other things we're going to talk about, will need some type of support. So you've got it in a nice big container with potting soil and fertilizer. It's going to grow, and if it were ground, it could sprawl, it could go up a fence, it could go all sorts of places. So in a container, you want to think of some type of support. So they call these tomato cages in the garden center. They are definitely on the small side for tomatoes. They work great for peppers, and they work great for a lot of containers. You put them in, you want to put them in with the plant when you plant them. Because if you plant your pepper and it starts to grow and then you go to put one of the cages on top of it, it can get kind of unwieldy and you have to worry about not injuring the roots and whatnot. So it's nice to get it all in one place when you plant such that it has somewhere to grow. With peppers and some other plants, you have the option to stake them. So in this one, they have these 2 wooden stakes here, and this gardener has basically used twine or something soft to tie the central leader as it goes up. So then it basically creates its own canopy. So that's another option for some peppers. Again, I would be more likely if you have, this is a picture of tomato actually, if you have a larger pepper, you'll probably want more of the tomato cage, whereas stakes are going to be more appropriate for some of the smaller, both sweet and hot peppers that you'll grow. Tomatoes, a big favorite, as we've already talked about. I'm still dreaming of my bruschetta since we talked about it at the beginning. Tomatoes are very vigorous growing vines. They're going to need a nice big container, at least 15 inches deep. Early Louise shared containers that were 24 and 30 inches deep. So you can get, they will fill up huge containers. So 15 I would view as a minimum of what you want to grow tomatoes. In containers, there's many different types of tomatoes, but the 2 key differentiators, there's determinate tomatoes and indeterminate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes are going to grow more like a bush. They're going to be a little more compact, and therefore they're actually going to do a little bit better in a container because they're, well, more contained. So. Kind of pun intended. So if you do have a choice, and especially if you're dealing with a little bit smaller space, you do want to look for a determinate tomato versus an indeterminate. Indeterminates can grow in containers. You'll definitely want to beef up your support structure. You want, a larger tomato cage, maybe something, a trellis they can grow up, or something a little more beefy to really help them do all the growing they'll want to grow. They will grow and produce tomatoes over a longer period of time. So that is something to keep an eye on as you decide on, what type of tomatoes to grow. The type of tomato, we find that cherry tomatoes tend to do particularly well in containers, and you can grow them in a variety of ways. We talk about the large pot, have them grow up into a system. We've seen many examples of hanging baskets that can grow cherry tomatoes. Again, because the fruit is not that heavy, the fruit doesn't need as much support, therefore you can get by with some of these more trailing habitats. Again, they'll also grow up, but another example is to let them grow and hang here. So they are a fun thing. And again, the cherries tend to do a little bit better in the containers because, the fruit size in there are very prolific. Eggplant. So eggplants are a fun, really beautiful one to go. We look at all these images and look at just how beautiful they are. Eggplants are going to be kind of similar to a pepper, at least 14-inch depth. Could be deeper. This one is it varies greatly based on the size of eggplant. I think a lot of people here, if you go to the store, you think of the eggplant as the big globe European eggplant that you see growing all the time. There's a lot of varieties where they grow a smaller eggplant. Like I believe this is a choo-choo. There's some Japanese eggplants and Rosa Biancas that grow a little bit smaller, that are a little more suited for the containers, mostly because that fruit size isn't going to bring the plant down. You are still going to give it some support. This one, again, it looks like this one's getting by without any. I'm not sure how long they let it go that way, but I would definitely give this one support just to make sure that it has what it needs to grow and give you the fruit that you want. Beans are another great summer crop. And all these I'm talking about, these are all warm. They want evenings to be, no colder than 60 degrees. So we want a nice warm environment for these guys. So these are going to need at least a 14-inch deep container. So again, just over a foot deep. Similar in nature to determinate versus indeterminate tomatoes, string beans will also come in. Bush beans versus pole beans are the 2 terms you'll hear. Bush beans are going to be bushier. They're going to need less support. Often they don't need any support. If you give them a little support, it might make it a little easier to harvest and train them, but they don't actually need it. They will grow as a bush. They tend to provide a little bit smaller crop, and they tend to provide a crop a little bit more all at once. Your pole beans are going to grow a little bit more like crazy or up something. You'll definitely want some type of support. This is a great candidate for along a fence the north side of a fence, so a southern exposure of a fence or a wall or something, and just let them grow up that with its support. You can use a trellis. Here you can see they've used looks like bamboo stakes and created a vertical area for those pole beans to grow. So in the soil, they can be planted fairly close together. And they're going to grow straight up. So it's actually a pretty good one as far as getting yields. If you have that kind of space and structure, it's an excellent opportunity to grow quite a few vegetables in a fairly small space. And again, it's great for a wall that is on the north side of a house or a fence, because then if it's on the north side, you've got the sun coming from the south, you can plant things in front of it that are lower growing, and those beans are still going to need the sunlight they need to grow. So they're a fun thing to grow. The other thing you can grow is the mighty zucchini, different types of squashes and cucumbers. These guys, again, love the warm. They're going to need a nice big area for the roots, at least 16 inches deep, especially as you get to the squashes, or if you go for the winter squashes, they're going to need even more. With these guys, you need to do a little more. You put a tomato in a tomato cage, it's going to fill it out. These guys, you need to do a little bit more encouraging to make sure they climb up whatever you're giving them, being it a cage, give it a stake, a trellis, whatnot. So just as it grows, you kind of want to be sure that it's tucked into its support system to make sure it grows the right way. And again, like other crops, especially for squash, you want to try to, again, ask at a garden center or read seed packets or the plant tags as to which ones are better suited for containers. I think you ask a lot of zucchini, people think of the zucchini that just grows and sprawls all over the ground of the garden. They can be trained. It is a function, again, diligence and just showing it. It's like the power suggestion. Here's where you should grow, and then they will grow where they need. But you're going to have better luck, again, looking for varieties that are at least, suggested for container or small gardening. Okay, questions? Yeah.
Just one quick thing.
Okay.
I know that powdery mildew is a big problem with squash and cucumbers. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. So yeah, powdery mildew you think mildew and you think wet and sticky and whatever. Powdery mildew is such a problem because it loves nice, fairly dry, fairly warm conditions, which is what we have pretty much all summer. So the least toxic way to take care of it is throughout the growing season. We talk a lot about, if you go to our other talks, getting water to the root zone. You want to get water to the root zones. You want the root zone to be wet. With things like squashes, cucumbers, peas, that's a cool season crop. Crops that are susceptible to powdery mildew, you actually want to use your hose to hose off the leaves once in a while. That helps keep the multiplication on the powdery mildew down at least a little bit at bay. So that's one strategy, is every once in a while give the leaves a squirt just to kind of knock off some of the spores. It's not going to knock off all the spores, they're pretty tough, but that'll help keep things in check. A little bit of powdery mildew isn't the end of the world for a lot of plants, again, if you keep the infection low. So that's one strategy. As you go on, if it just gets really, really, really bad, zucchini and squash are actually not bad candidates for what we call succession planting, which is a fancy way of saying you have a zucchini plant, it grows, it gives you zucchini, starts to get powdery mildew. Oh, what did you put in a pot 2 weeks ago? Oh, a fresh zucchini seed. So then you can actually, reinvigorate your soil with more nitrogen, put that zucchini in and let it grow. So, so that is an option. Just do a succession planning of that type of crop. So those are my two suggestions. And you can go to the IPM site for more specifics. So
great.
So got it. Let's see. So we have a little bit of time. I'd love to cover. So chances are good that you have a place that you might be able to grow vegetables, nice sunny location, big old pot, lots of support structure. I don't know about your backyard. My backyard is not all that. So there are definitely times where you're going to have smaller areas or shadier areas, which just don't get the amount of sun to get that tomato fully ripe. So talk about some things you can do there. Herbs are my favorite. I guess I like to eat, so that might be why I like herbs and vegetables. Herbs can do quite well. Some of them can just grow in an itty bitty pot, little 4-inch deep pot. You can actually combine them with each other in containers, or you can actually combine them with some edibles. You've got, some of your larger crops that need lots of, surface down below to grow their roots. You can sometimes get by with a little row of herbs on top. So some of the annuals that we can grow, annuals are ones that generally you're going to grow for a season and eat them as they grow. And at least 2 of these, you need to eat them as they grow, because otherwise they will go to seed very quickly. So both basil and cilantro, especially cilantro, it's nice and leafy and green. And man, you turn your back and suddenly it's sending up, it's turning into coriander seed, and then the green cilantro leaves aren't so tasty. So you do want to, again, keep them well watered as they're growing. As they grow, you're going to eat them as they grow. Pinch off the top growth to make sure that they don't develop seed heads. That's going to help kind of keep some of that green leafy stuff growing. And have that grow. Technically, these are all full sun plants. In reality, in a lot of our test gardens throughout the state, we're finding that they actually do fine with the partial sun, partial shade. I think almost every plant that is in this category loves the morning sun, doesn't like the afternoon sun because it's hot and drenching, and all of these herbs I found fall into that that distinction. So these are great things to grow in pots in the summer. You can also move on over to the perennials, or some of the, these are basically herbs that will grow year after year if you let them. So from left to right, we've got some oregano, some marjoram, some sage and thyme that all grow in plants. We've got 2 per pot in these examples. These are plants, again, you can let them grow year after year after year. As they get older and woodier, they're going to be a little bit less, you aren't going to have that lush green growth as you do every year. And if you do grow them year over year, you are going to want to cut them down. The 2 common times are right before flowering, much like you do your basil to keep it from going to seed. In this case, you're just keeping that green growing versus having it send its energy to get seeds. The other option is to cut it down in the dormant season. So be it fall or early in the spring, you cut it down and then it can grow back from there. So those are a couple options. In containers, you'll want to keep an eye. Perennials are going to, over many years, they'll again keep growing roots and keep growing more plants. So they are more candidates to outgrow their container. One of my strategies is that I'll grow, for example, sage in a container for, usually I'm greedy, I give it 2 seasons, and then it's still healthy, but it's a little big for the container. That's when it goes in part of the garden, and then I replenish with something else. So that's a strategy if you're one of those people with the luxury of both areas. So those are, so herbs are a fun thing to grow in the part saying. Ornamentals, so I'm going to start out with ornamentals that have similar water and nutrient requirements to vegetables. So this is an example. Ranunculus is beautiful, a little late for them now. But you can do basically containers just for flowers that are for enjoyment. You can either grow individual plants or you can mix them up. You can spend a lot of time between Pinterest, Sunset, and the rest of the internet finding all these beautiful containers that are a nice mix of different ornamentals. They can do really great in containers. You're going to want to provide the water and nutrients, very similar to vegetables with this type of ornamental. Again, shade, you're not going to be able to grow tomatoes if you're only getting 3 hours of sun in a particular location. So you might as well go for some fun things that will just look beautiful. So cyclamens are great for shady locations. And there's just so many things you can grow in the shade. This is a rosemary, which is not technically a shade plant, but it tends to do quite well, especially if you're doing containers and again, you're swapping out or, chopping them down to eat. Have some examples. Going beyond some of the more, tender succulent, I love, or more tender plants that love the water and love the rich nutrients. We can do a lot of other things in containers. So succulents are a lot of fun and often can be very forgiving for new gardeners. So succulents are good. Succulents, any plant that keeps moisture in its tissue. And they're often good for containers, or they're fun for containers in that their roots don't go down very deep. So you can get by with some shallow containers. You can do big bowls with succulents spilling out. They can be a lot of fun and fairly forgiving. When you do plant succulents and some other lower water things, you will want to, instead of using that potting mix I talked so much about earlier, you'll want to look for a specific mix for that plant. So for example, there's a lot of cactus mix or succulent mixes that you'll want to be looking for these types of plants. They're going to be a lot more, we talked about using like perlite and other minerals. Cactus mixes generally have a lot more of that type of thing, such that again, the succulents get the moisture they need versus the moisture that a tomato would need. So that is something to keep an eye out for. There's a lot of fun, beautiful things you can do with succulents. One tip is, again, knowing that succulents have fairly low root zones. If you've got these big pots, sometimes you want your container garden, you want the visual part to be nice high up. For succulents, because they don't need much root, you can actually put, for example, in here, you can put an upside down terracotta pot, for example, and then use only the top with your growing mediums. That saves a little water and makes it such that you still have a nice, healthy place to grow and display your succulents. It's very quick. You can also do a lot of fun things to encourage local wildlife. So I also like gardening with California native plants. There's a lot of them that will grow just fine in containers. Again, you want to look at the soil mix you're using. You want something that's a little more tolerant. I noticed some of the garden centers are now offering plant mixes or potting mixes that are specific for California native plants and that type of thing. So do look for something like that. You can also err kind of more towards those succulent mixes versus a general potting soil mix. But there's a lot that will grow in containers, and they will help encourage some of those fun things you like to see. I love planting penstemons, and man, the hummingbirds love it. So you just, you've got it there blooming, and you see the hummingbirds coming and visiting you. It's a fantastic, fantastic side benefit of gardening. So with your vegetables, we talked about always moist, never let soil dry out, that sort of thing. With some of the lower water plants, those rules might change a little. So there are some of the native plants that will want to dry between waterings, not nearly as much as in a garden soil area though, again, because it's a pot and the roots are going to be more exposed. If you are going to let the roots dry out, it's not going to be for very long for most plants, again, because it's in the pot. In nature, a lot of these will go all summer without water, but in pots you are going to do probably less frequent, but again, as deeper watering to get them on the side where they're going to be happy. Let's see, and I have, that is the gist of gardening in containers. There's obviously a lot to cover. Let's see, Louise, any questions? I had some specifics on Can I Grow ABC?
Let's see. What, from Hector and Blanca, what do you recommend when you have white grubs in your bed?
Oh, white grubs in container or in your in-ground beds?
Well, this says a bed, so okay. I suppose it could be wherever the white grubs are.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I guess in any soil, if you're seeing a grub, so a certain amount of grubs, you know, they look icky and they look awful. If it's a fairly low number, they're actually what we call it, you know, the macroscopic fauna in your soil, where they're actually, you know, they're eating and moving things and doing things in the soil. So a small amount can be tolerable if they're not injuring your plant. Once there's a lot of them or they're injuring your plants, you know, again, if you notice injury or if you notice, you know, too many, you do want to, you know, get them out. Personally, I do the physical, much like I do with snails and slugs and whatnot, physically get them out to the extent that you can. Then it's nice to delve in to figure out why are they there. So is it a place that's too wet? Is it a place that's, do they have a, you know, some type of protection if there's like large chunks of wood and maybe they're hiding under there. It's nice to just find out what's the source of them and try to clean up the source. So those are the least, you know, toxic and problematic ways to deal with them. And to be honest, a lot of the times it is just figuring out, making sure it's an environment where they aren't happy if they aren't welcome, and then they won't be there with some hand picking and including getting them somewhere else. So, and again, the IPM site will give more advanced information, especially on the cultural things you can do to make sure that they don't have too much of a presence.
So someone has asked if you can reuse the soil in the pot.
That is an excellent question. So what we recommend, especially for edibles and things that are heavy feeders, is to, every time you plant something new, to replace all the garden soil, and ideally actually clean out the pot that you were using with the 10% bleach solution, just to make sure, you know, it's nice, clean, and sterile. Do I do that every time? I do not. So for edibles, and again, things that are heavy feeders, often I do. And that's not only because of the nutrient in the soil, but the soil, its ability to hold and retain moisture degrades the more you've planted in it. Again, it's not a natural soil ecosystem where you have the earthworms rebuilding the soil and you have all the mycorrhizae that are creating a great environment for plants. Because you don't have that, you kind of need to make sure that is replicated. So, so personally for me, to be honest, and there's making sure it has enough potting mix such that it is doing soil retention, it has the nutrients the plant needs. So I might, you know, reuse 80% of my soil in some of the areas when I'm doing ornamentals, or when it's a new planting of, you know, I'll grow mimulus, for example, a California native, in a pot, and then with the plans to transport it, plant it the following fall. So, but yeah, but you'll get the best results from replacing that soil every time.
Great. Holly is asking if you could briefly discuss when to transplant a young fruit tree into a larger container.
Ah, okay. Again,
trees.
Another topic I could spend hours talking on. Let's see. So when to transplant fruit trees? So generally the best time to transplant fruit trees, and I'll talk deciduous trees, so ones that drop their leaves in the winter. Winter is an excellent time to do the transplanting. They're dormant, they're kind of asleep anyway. So if it's outgrowing a container, or if it's ready to go into the ground, dormant time is a great time to transplant. In fact, often when you establish new fruit trees, you buy them as dormant rootstock in the winter, and then you plant them. So that's by far the best time to do that for the ones that are, you know, go summer dormant. You can also do it, you know, in the fall as the rains start. You know, that way when you're transplanting, it's a nice warm soil area. But yeah, so those are the two best times. That said, in theory, you can do it at any time. The heat of the summer, again, with hot days and that stressor, that's not going to be a great time to do transplanting. And now citrus is a whole nother story. Citrus, again, you'll want to look for kind of moist, not intense heat conditions just to make sure the transplant works well. Did that answer the question?
I think so.
I'm so used to looking and making eye contact with
if she has more, she can type more in, but I think that's a pretty good answer to when. Yeah. Someone else has asked about coffee grounds. Are coffee grounds good for plants? How could you use coffee grounds in your garden?
Got it. So coffee grounds are so when we talk about gardening in our clay soils, we want to add pretty much any form of organic matter that's going to make it a nice, rich planting soil. So in general, we're saying coffee grounds, adding it to either your compost pile or even to, you know, a garden soil is going to be a decent thing to use as something to mix into your native soil. As far as containers, again, with containers, we're a little more particular with what to add to the containers, again, because you need a very specific mix of, you know, porosity and water holding capacity and drainage and that sort of thing. Also, to introduce something with potential pathogens, not much grows in coffee grounds. That said, you know, it's adding another element of things that are not potting soil that could impact the growth of that plant. So again, I would keep coffee grounds. Ideally, it's a great, if you home compost, it's great for that. I will use it in limited basis as a top dressing for my garden soil in a lot of places.
I think we might be at the end of the questions.
Okay. I remember one from the first half. Someone asked a great question. So can I grow, well, they asked what type of lemon lime trees. There was a picture at the beginning of the session, it's a beautiful lemon tree in a beautiful container, and there was me and I think other people going, "Oh, it's so beautiful." Question is what varieties do well, and again, when you buy citrus, often you can get dwarf citrus trees. So depending on the size of your container, I would say most containers, I would aim for a dwarf variety. They're just going to do a little better in the smaller form factor. With citrus, you do want to make sure they're in a nice warm spot. They're a good candidate for along that sunny wall that's really warm. That said, they're also a good candidate for putting on wheels if you have the luxury in the winter of moving them somewhere warmer. We do get freezes here in Santa Clara Valley, and so there are some nights you're going to need to protect it, either putting a sheet over it. And often in those situations, if you can wheel, or if your citrus is already next to a nice warm wall, that could be enough to keep it from freezing overnight. So those are some things with the citrus. Someone asked, can I grow a trumpet vine in a container? And I would need to look it up. I know that trumpet vines are known to people that plant them. They're beautiful, and then they go and send out their little trumpet vines and will take over your garden if you aren't too careful. So a lot of people advocate for keeping it separate out of garden soil, so it does not do that. So that's my anecdotal. Louise, do you know if people have luck growing trumpet vines in containers and how big?
I don't even know what a trumpet vine is. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you mean like the ones with the red or the purple flowers?
I believe so. The person included the botanic name. So
okay.
So yeah, I would encourage
the ones I know. The red trumpet vine and the purple trumpet vine are super aggressive plants. So you might be able to start them in containers for a year or so, but then they would probably outgrow it pretty fast, if I'm thinking of the right one.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, well, if it were my garden and I like that, I would give it a try, see when it gets too big. And it could easily be, you can do a cutting, grow from a cutting, and then you have a second trumpet vine, for example. So that would be one tactic. So yeah, that's when I would go to help desk. If you shoot an email to help desk and ask, they'll be able to, if they don't know off the top of their head, they'll be able to look it up pretty quickly. So, and
I see a question I'd like to answer. Wow, now we're getting a bunch. One person asked about what kind of easy to maintain veggies can be grown from seed now. It is not too late to grow things. It is only early May, and our summer is going to go through October. So you can plant almost anything now. The easiest ones would probably be tomatoes, beans, squash. What else is easy? I would maybe stay away from lettuce now because we're going to be getting into hot weather. You might want to stay away from peas because it's kind of too hot for peas. But certainly there's a lot of things, because the soil is getting warm now and the weather is warm. Almost anything you could try. Most veggies you could give it a try right now from seed. Let's see. There you go.
I'm going to share something real quick because it is my favorite resource that we have. And if you guys if I've ever talked to you in real life, you've probably heard me say this. So my favorite resource, are you seeing a Chrome browser screen?
Yes.
Vegetable. Okay. So this is our, on the mgsantaclara.ucnr.edu page, we have a area for vegetables specifically. And this is where you can go for a lot of information on growing vegetables. If you scroll down here, we have when to plant. Here in Santa Clara County, we grow vegetables year round. You click on the vegetable planting chart. This is a resource. I still refer to it pretty much every year, at least once or twice. As you scroll down, I'll try not to move too much because I know I get car sick when other people drive. Here we have a list of all the different vegetables you can grow in Santa Clara County. We tell you what months of the year you can either transplant. So that would be like if you went to the garden center and bought a little 6-pack, what months you can transplant that into a garden. And then what months you can actually take arugula seeds, put them in the ground and have them develop. So for example, we're looking at arugula. Arugula, if you had transplants, you could plant them now, you could plant them in May. June, it's getting iffy. So arugulas, once you plant them, it's a little warm to grow them basically in this middle of the year. So we're saying that, yes, you can plant them now, probably not June. Go ahead and wait till September and then you can plant them again. So we have this for a bunch of crops. So I'll go for beans, for example. Beans are my favorite because you can do a lot of different plantings. So beans, you can go all the way up into August and possibly plant them. So June, July is a fantastic time to direct seed beans.
And beans are so rewarding.
They are.
They are.
There. And you get a pole bean, you go pick exactly the number of beans you need for that night's dinner, and you don't have to go to the store, which I love, especially these days. So, so anyway, so this is a resource I like to point people to as far as you can see here in this county, what grows well when and when you can plant things. So.
Someone has, oh, I'm sorry. Are you done with?
Oh, yes.
Any more comments about that? Timing wise, this is May. If you look at this chart that Lisa's pointing out, and May is a really good month to start a lot of different summer veggies. Even you could even put a tomato seed in the ground and you would probably get tomatoes by September. Because since it's so warm now, the plants are going to grow really fast and they'll catch up to ones that were planted earlier. You might not get as many, but yeah. Someone has asked a question I saw back there. Oh, best place to buy seeds. I have a personal recommendation that I think a really good thing for people to do is to explore the resources in catalogs. There are a lot of catalogs. I'm not sure if I'm probably not supposed to throw out brand names, but if you look online for seed catalogs, heirloom seed catalogs, seed sharing exchanges, there are tons and tons of places that you can buy a lot of different seeds from. And then of course there's the seed rack at the nursery too.
Yep, I think both are great options. And yeah, the seed catalogs, you just have, it's a little overwhelming actually. You think, oh, I'm going to grow zucchini, and then you go to a seed catalog and go, holy cow, I just wanted a green zucchini. So yeah, so there's a lot of options, but then of course it's that rat hole that I don't know, I enjoy, but then again, I'm a master gardener, so I might be a little weird that way.
Someone says our ground eggshell's a good source of nutrition.
Eggshell, so in theory, there's a lot of calcium in them. I think in reality, what did the lab test show? It took dozens, if not 100 years for that to actually get into the soil. Is that right?
I don't know specifically the answer.
Yeah. So extremely long term, it's great. In the short term, it's really not going to help the nutrient level in the soil. What I have heard it can be effective as you want to clean them really good, because if there's any egg goo in it, it's going to attract critters you don't want. But the crinkly form circled around something, if you have snail and slugs, I believe that is one option to keep snails and slugs away from certain plants.
I have heard that the idea that you can put eggshells into the soil for tomatoes is for blossom end rot is kind of a myth, and it really has a lot more to do with watering.
Yeah, it's the calcium. So blossom end rot is something tomatoes get, and it is technically a calcium deficiency, but in reality, usually it has to do with the fact that the watering was uneven. So the tomato just didn't get calcium because the watering schedule was not appropriate. So yeah, so eggshells, again, long term, it would provide that calcium. In the short term, it's more of a texture thing, basically. So
let's see. I think we might be coming to the end.
Okay. Well, we're already, I think, 15 minutes over the poor library's allotted time.
Oh, wait, Wendy.
I was going to say no problem. And if you want to, oh, sorry to cut you off, Louise.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question verbally, feel free to do that. If anyone has any last minute questions, and want to thank you two both again so much. The one thing that's been keeping me going during the SIPs, as I mentioned, is this gardening. So
Good. And it sounds like your garden is already going, huh?
Yeah, I've got, I mean, you know, it's not as ambitious as yours for sure, but it's a start.
That's,
Well,
that's, you start and then you win some, you lose some, and just, be ready to take those deep breaths. And sometimes it's just not the year for eggplant, or it's not the year for, whatever it is. So,
exactly.
but yeah, but this year I have high hopes that this will be a good year for people, because I think the main problem people have with their vegetable gardens is the lack of attention to them. But given that we're all sheltered at home, I think we have a lot of attention to give to our gardens.
Exactly. I
So, yeah.
should have shown you my before and after of my patio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
I have a question. This is Colleen.
Hey, Colleen.
Hi. My question is this. Has anybody been to Summer Winds just since they opened back up on the 4th? And do you know if their supply of vegetables is pretty good, or are they just in the process of getting things in?
That is a good question. I haven't physically been there. I do follow them and Yamagami's and Almaden Valley on Facebook, so I've gotten some updates from there. I think they're just so tickled to finally be open and have people coming in. So I think they're excited about that. I don't know Summer Winds. I know Yamagami's update was we're working with our suppliers. We're working on getting more in. So they're very optimistic that it's like the spigot had started to open. They're expecting it to be more open within a week or two. So that was, again, Facebook, Yamagami's on Facebook. That was the update there.
Okay.
Any
That's
other updates
great.
from the local centers? Yeah.
Sorry,
great.
Colleen. Oh, sorry to cut
Like,
you off.
just real quick. It's like it's not too late to be planting stuff then. That's what I was concerned about. Maybe it's getting to be too late.
It is not. And actually, we noticed over the past years, especially, the garden centers are pushing warm season vegetables way too early. So for example, I was seeing tomatoes being sold in February, and we don't advise you put tomatoes in the ground till overnight temperatures are above 55. And beans, you want to wait till the overnight temperature lows don't go below 60. So really, you're wanting to plant April, May, June anyway. So you're in good shape, especially for the warm things like eggplants and beans and cucumbers and zucchinis and whatnot. You're actually better off waiting till now to plant, and maybe not even now, because it looks like it's going to get cold the next couple of nights.
Yeah. Our weather up and down. Oh, thank you. That's great.
You're welcome.
Great class. Great.
Colleen, I was going to just, sorry to chime in. Since you mentioned Summer Winds, I wanted to mention, I did drive by there several times. There was a huge line, so I did not go in. I was at Home Depot yesterday, and they had quite a bit of vegetables and stuff still in supply. In fact, the one over by, I think it's Cottle, they had a bunch outside even. And
Okay.
and there was no line when we went. It was around 11 a.m.
Oh, good to know, Lisa. Very good.
Yeah, good
Thank
luck.
you.
And also, I've seen them. I don't know what the quality is like. I saw them outside at Rite Aid a few times as well. Not a huge selection. So good luck.
Super. Thanks.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Hi, I have a question. This is Hector.
Hi, Hector.
Hi, Hector.
Thank you for taking my question. So, yeah, I have a bed that is 4 by 8 and it's 24 inches high. And a couple years ago, we filled that up with some type of soil, potting soil fertilizer, organic. And the first vegetables were beautiful and very sweet, and we enjoyed them a lot. My question is if I need to amend this soil. I did add some organic compost and then mix it with the existing soil. And I was wondering if I need to, I already plant seeds and some small plants like tomatoes. I was wondering if I need to add fertilizer.
So that's a good question. So the short answer is chances are good, yes. Tell me about, is this a standalone garden or is it like in the ground? It sounds like it's raised, but does it touch the ground or is it just self-contained?
Yeah, so what I did is I have a very small back patio that was concrete, but I broke the concrete, right?
Okay.
I removed the concrete, and so yeah, that's where I put the bed. And so you see this like potting soil, and then 24 inches under you will touch the clay, the actual native soil.
Got it. But it's clay
Right.
soil that's been under concrete for who knows how many years. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Got
Yes.
it. Okay. So it sounds like it's a lot of potting soil, but then there's some native soil under there somewhere, which, you know, eventually will become a life enhancing thing, hopefully. So yeah, so if you started with potting soil, again, potting soil is like a different, it's a mixture that's kind of designed to hold its own by itself. And again, if it was a pot, we'd recommend every year just fully swapping out the soil. So now that given you've got some native soil in there, that is hopefully, is it starting to work into the soil, or is it still a hard pan layer? Can you really tell?
I think it's starting to work into the soil. So when I added the compost, that was maybe 4 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I put a layer of cardboard.
Uh-huh.
Then that's when we start seeing the earthworms
Good. Okay.
and other maybe beneficial insects there. So that was good.
Good. Yeah, no, that's those are good ways to kind of get, because it's great to get that clay soil incorporated into your garden soil, because it's fantastic for nutrients, which ties into your question of will it need more fertilizer. So the good and bad thing about compost, it's a fantastic soil addition. Often they have nitrogen, which is the main mineral that you're going to need. The problem with vegetables is you're never sure how much it's providing, so you don't know how much nitrogen. Is it enough for the plants, or you're going to need supplement? So I would recommend, we generally recommend in normal garden soils, adding a source of nitrogen whenever you plant an edible, because nitrogen is going to be used up by the plants that you grow. So you're going to need another source of nitrogen. I would do something in addition to compost. Now, given that sounds like your soil is still growing from and using the potting soil, my hunch is that you would want to use an NPK with no other information. You'd probably want to use a balanced fertilizer, much like you'd use for a container garden, until you're seeing more of that soil life. Louise, would you have a different recommendation?
It sounds like they've been growing. Hector, you've been growing in this bed for a couple of years now.
Yes, the first year was very, very big vegetables and tasteful. The second year was not that good.
Yeah, basically that's probably telling you that the plants aren't getting the nutrition they want, because when you grow vegetables in any soil, but especially in a bed or a raised bed or a container, when you take that tomato or those beans or the leaves away because you're eating them, well, that's nutrition for you. That nutrition has come out of the soil. It's no longer in the soil. If you ate it and it gave you nutrition, it took that nutrition away from the soil. So that means you have to fertilize. And I recommend putting fertilizer, and like Lisa said, something balanced, probably with all three numbers the same, and low numbers probably, just to be on the safe side, less than 10. Every time you plant a new set of veggies. So for example, in the early spring, put some additional fertilizer, in the spring when you're planting your summer garden, add some fertilizer and some compost. And then after you take those veggies out and you start putting in some things for the fall, put in some more fertilizer and some more compost. That's kind of a routine that I recommend. You could get more detailed about what kind of nutrients you're adding, but that does work pretty well as a rule of thumb.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good luck. We'll hope that continues to go well.
Thank you.
There's still more questions.
Okay.
Let's see.
Well, I have till 6. Oh, it's almost 6. I have till 6. So I have another 4 minutes, but Louise, you can, it's up to you and Lisa how much longer. So
I'll leave it up to you both.
Lisa, why don't you go ahead? Maybe we can I don't even know what a farrow bean is, so maybe we could stop here. If anybody knows what farrow beans are, they could answer that one. That's new to me.
Farrow beans. Oh,
do you know what they are?
I've heard of them. I've never grown them, so I would need to look up. Is the question whether they grow well or?
I planted farrow bean plants because I read they were high in protein.
Okay.
Then I read they were for farmland to enrich it. And now I don't want them in the garden. Well, rip them out.
Rip them out, or you could also look up, this is getting an advanced topic, it might be a type of crop, if it's like fava beans, if you decapitate it, if you cut it down and blend that into the soil, that is that would be a green manure source. If it was different types of legumes are actually really good at fixing nitrogen in the soil. So you might be able to cut it, incorporate it in the soil, and that's an organic form of nitrogen for you. So that's a little more advanced, but definitely look in to see if that type of bean is a nitrogen fixing crop. So there's,
I think that might be it.
yeah.
Are we done?
I think we're done, you guys. Thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for joining us, and appreciate your patience. This is all a new medium for us. And they did excellent, of course, but we had, it's a little bit challenging trying to get to everyone's questions and unmuting and muting and all that good stuff. So
yeah, thank you. And if there are questions now or in the future as you're doing your gardens, if you have questions, just go to our site. It's that the Santa Clara, this site here. On the front page, there's a Ask a Gardening question. You can actually submit questions. You can even upload photos if you see something in your garden, not sure what it is. And then our help desk people will help you diagnose what's going on and give you a course of action. So
yeah, and follow them on social media too, because you can get some really good updates as well on your Facebook page and all that, right?
We try to share things that you might see now or you might help you now. So yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll follow up with an email again, and I'll include our library survey. If you can give us input, much appreciated. All the great information these people provided, I'll pass that along as well.
Good deal.
Okay. And I guess
Lisa,
we'll
for
wrap it up.
hosting us.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I'll have to go back and listen to it.
All right. Yeah.
and I will email you the video as well. Okay. And then
Great.
we'll post this at some point on our website as well as theirs probably.
Great.
And thank all three of you. It was great. Great.
Great. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great weekend. Well, we're only
too.
Tuesday.
Well,
yeah.
Is it that I lose track of time? Okay. Good night, all.
Good night.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.